7 years ago, this woman's daughter began to disappear from her life.
She went there, had a weekend with them, and from that minute on she was distant, she was serious, she was devious, she was talking Scientology talk, she came home with books on Scientology.
To the church, Sharon was a negative influence. Her daughter wrote to her, cutting all ties.
At present, I'm not interested in receiving your calls, emails or letters, and if you do send any, I will view it as harassment, and I won't bother reading them, so please don't waste your time. They've crushed the bond we have. They've stolen her, so it's beyond a bond. They've removed the bond.
I have a daughter who's very much into the church. I was planning on talking to my daughter and trying to tell her what was really happening. She hugged me. She told me she loved me. She said, I have to disconnect from you.
Most of Mike's family are still inside Scientology. None of them speak to him or his dying father. They've been disconnected.
I didn't speak to him all the time I was in Scientology, and after I left the church, I reestablished ties with him, and it's difficult to describe how a man of 76 years whose proudest accomplishment in life is his 6 children, they won't speak to him.
Hawkins says he was declared a suppressive person, a church term for an enemy of Scientology or its principles. He says the church has a policy called Disconnection, which pressures church members to cut off all ties with anyone declared suppressive.
If you have a family member who has been declared suppressive or who has been critical of the church, you cannot contact them if you're a Scientologist. If your son, daughter, father, mother has left the church and is critical or anything like that, you cannot talk to them, period.
I knew my life would change. I knew all Scientologists would stay a mile away from me. I knew I would lose any friend I ever had within the church. And some of these people I'd worked with forever, I'd loved. People that had worked with me and won Emmys because of the good work they did.
Amy Scobie, another former Sea Organization member who once helped run the church's Celebrity Center in Los Angeles, says her mother was told to disconnect from her when she left.
In fact, I was at her house when Scientologists came with the issue, my suppressive person issue, to tell her that she could no longer see me. I was in the back room. They didn't know I was there. And they showed her the issue, saying how I violated command channels and had sex out of wedlock and all this stuff. And, and that until I got back in good standing with the church, which I had no intention of doing, she could not be in communication with me. So she told me that she didn't have a choice. It was the worst day of my life.
The fact that I had a declared brother did sort of follow me around as a problem in the Sea Org. My brother was always hanging in the background as a potential problem with Aaron. He has a declared twin brother. I met my wife, Heather, in the Sea Org, and she was in a higher level organization than I was in. It was tradition in the organization she was in to ask the commanding officer for permission to get married. It's supposed to be for show. It's not literally supposed to be approve or disapprove.
Right.
It came back disapproved. The fact that I had a declared twin brother and also was in touch with my father, who was in touch with my brother, prevented me and Heather from being able to get married for a while. So I was technically still connected to my brother, even though I hadn't seen him or spoken to him in over a year.
Right, it wasn't enough.
They made me sign something that said I would disconnect from my father so that I could get married.
Right.
My father's never been a Scientologist and has never said one negative word about Scientology to me. How do you take disconnection to that level? You can't get married because you talk to your dad who talks to your brother. I mean, the stupidity is incredible.
So all of us here have experienced this personally. All of the 4 of us, our family members have all disconnected from us on the basis of being ordered to do so by Scientology. I knew as I was walking out of this building, that was the last time that I would ever talk to my wife. It was the last time I'd ever talk to my children. It was the last time I'd ever talk to any of the rest of my family. My wife disconnected from me, my daughter, my son, my brother, my sister, my mother, all of my nieces and nephews. And that is the only family that I have.
Before I even joined the Sea Org, so I'm 16, and one of my really good friends, her name is Kelly, her father was declared a suppressive person. I'm in Scientology, and what do I do with this? And I don't care. She's my friend. I did, like, personally, me, I didn't give a crap she could do whatever the hell she wanted. She was one of my best friends. And but then when she reconnected with her father, who was excommunicated from the church, I had to, like, talk to my parents about it and what should I do? And my dad said, well, if you don't disconnect from her, we're gonna disconnect from you. I'm 16 years old, and I'm like, what? Right. So I did, because I didn't want to lose my family. It was really scary. It was like, really? You'll actually, like, really? Like, I didn't believe it, but I wasn't about to test it out. Right. You know what I mean? I was like, no, you wouldn't. That was my thought. Like, they would never disconnect from. I'm their daughter. They love me. I'm their firstborn baby. Right. You know. Yeah. So anyway, but at the time I wasn't gonna try that. I was just like going along with the rules, and you know. On the phone with my mother, I said, Mom, are you going to disconnect from me? And she said, well, if they tell me to, then I am. And it's like, you have to do what you're told to stay in good standing with the church.
What would happen if you actually went and saw your mother today? Like, what would she do?
Hide.
Because
we tried.
I went to her house when I had my son in my arms. He was 6 months old, so that was 5.5 years ago. I went to my parents' house in Los Angeles. I knocked on the door. I walked all around the property. I looked in the windows. I called their names. I think they knew we were coming because there was a lot of PIs following us, private investigators following us that day. And they probably, told my dad not to be available and made sure to fly my mom away because my mom would be more vulnerable. So they weren't there. So I left a note. I gave them my phone number. I said, I'm in town. I'm here. I was like shivering. I was shaking with fear, and the fear of rejection, of what if I open the door and they see me and slam the door in my face? Like, is that going to be more painful? Is it worth it? Is it worth the pain of even trying? Or is it better to just give up and move on because it hurts so much to try and get rejected?
You have zero contact with your brother.
Correct.
And who else?
Sister,
yeah.
Nieces, nephews,
children. They'll never know Mike Render.
Or your children.
They'll never know Christy.
Yeah.
They'll never know, like, Christy, right? You have family here, right? Mm-hmm. Your mom's here?
My mom and my brother and sister.
And, yeah, I know.
Sad.
We also went to Australia to try and see my mother when she was in a nursing home. And when we got there, she had been whisked away. I knew that that was going to be the last time I was going to have an opportunity to see my mother. And it was sort of devastating that the lengths that Scientology would go to just to prevent me or prevent her from seeing me and meeting Christy.
Right.
Like, they flew her out of state, an 80-year-old woman who'd had a heart transplant, who was in a nursing home, an assisted living facility, and they got her out of there to avoid me showing up to say hello and giving her a kiss on the forehead and say, I love you.
Like me, when Tom left the Sea Organization, every one of his family members who was still a Scientologist disconnected from him.
I lost all my friends that I'd known for 28 years. My sister, niece, nephew, my 2 brothers.
We're living that every day of our lives. Our children are living that.
Claire and Mark Headley. Leaving has cost them their families. Their little boys have never seen their grannies. Rather than leaving the church with its blessing, Mark and Claire fled.
The day after I left, my entire family were called in and shown our declarers.
Suppressive person
we're now
declared.
suppressive.
Which means that they
suppressive
can no longer
persons.
talk to you.
That's right. My mom, my stepdad, 2 sisters, a brother, they all remain in Scientology.
The last phone call I had with my sister was her bawling her eyes out, telling me that she could never talk to me again.
My mother has never met her only grandchildren, and her parents have never met their only grandchildren. I've never spoken or seen my sister since the day I left.
And she's a Scientologist.
She's a Scientologist. My mother is also still a Scientologist, and she has no contact with us. She told her Catholic family that if she ever spoke to Claire or I again, it would risk all mankind's future eternity.
The saying is the greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics. In Scientology, they have a thing called dynamics, which is just taking every area of your life and separating them into 8 departments. So your first dynamic would be yourself. Your second dynamic is your family. Third dynamic is groups, your job. Fourth dynamic is mankind. Fifth dynamic is living things, up until your 8th dynamic, which is infinity, God. And when making a decision in Scientology, a Scientologist will ask you, well, what's the greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics? Do I pick my child who doesn't want to be in Scientology? That's one dynamic. In comparison to mankind, to sacrifice one for the betterment of the survival of mankind, not just this lifetime, but for eternity. Scientology offers the person who desperately wants to be more than what they are a mission of saving mankind. And the policy that feeds into that is called Keeping Scientology Working. It says, the agonized future of every man, woman, and child depends on what you do here and now in Scientology. This is our only chance to get out of the trap. So Scientologists are banking on, okay, I'm going to sacrifice this lifetime because we're going to clear the planet. This is the chance now. And if we don't do it now, we might never have the chance again.
Speaking to me would risk their and all of mankind's future eternity.
Because it's going to impede their eternity? When you think about it, you know what I mean? Really think about that. What about now? What about now?
When our first son was born in the hospital, I called her parents, who lived 15 minutes away. I called them and I said, I just wanted you to know Claire's okay, the baby's okay. Click.
Hung up on you.
Hung up on me. Her first grandchild was being born.
So it was really tough, you know, not seeing her.
Even when he had a heart attack, she couldn't come.
Yeah, she couldn't come and see me when I had a heart attack.
Then you lost your mother because she passed away. And you didn't even know that that had happened because Scientology doesn't see Mike as human.
Right.
To call him and contact him, to let them know it.
And the same thing happened when her father passed away.
In the world of Scientology, disconnection is so important. When they cut ties to a suppressive person, the Scientologists don't think about those people anymore. They don't look at them, they don't pay attention to them.
If you are a good Scientologist and someone from the organization tells you this person is bad, that's it.
Yeah.
You're not questioning.
I was in a Home Depot and ran across Danner. Danner was there too. And, you know, I told him he needs to get into communication with his mom. And I said, your mom loves you. All the while he doing his best to ignore me and had a look on his face of, I can't talk to him, I gotta get out of here. And he bought his stuff and left as quickly as he could. And it was sad.
Yeah, so he hasn't spoken to his mother.
For 6 years.
So I'm at a picnic and I see Leah. And I go, okay, I turn and walk the other way because I don't want to make her feel uncomfortable. And then she would say, Paul, I said, hey. She said, why are you acting so weird? I said, well, I didn't want to make you feel uncomfortable, Leah. She said, no, Paul, you are my friend. You will always be my friend. I don't care what. And I went, oh, well, thank you. She's the only one who did that. You know, and you were still in the church at the time. That meant a lot to me. It meant a lot. Thank you.
This house here on the left, Leah, Heather's mother and father own that house and rent it out. And they come here often, and that's Aaron's house right across the street. And they do not talk. They see Aaron and Heather outside, they go inside.
And they have grandchildren.
And they have 3 beautiful daughters who are sitting over here.
So their kids will be out here and their grandparents ignore them.
Correct.
It's so disgusting.
It is. It's really gross.
He just told me that you send your babies over there and their grandparents don't just ignore them?
My mother-in-law, she is the one who was much more nervous about it and would go inside, and then the kids would go in the house to find her, and they couldn't find her. She'd
But she would hide.
Yeah.
She would hide from her grandbabies.
And not because she didn't want to see them, because she didn't want to get in trouble.
Right.
Because the church said, it is not okay for you to see your grandchildren and for you to be over there and for you to see your grandchildren. Everything you're doing right now, you're doing it because you think you're somehow trying to hold the family together, or what's left of the family. But you're the second generation and the third generation, all they know of Scientology is it's the reason they don't have a family. It's crazy.
I know.
It's crazy.
I know.
They owned the 2 properties across the street from the house where we live in. And they had to sell those properties because it was put them in too close of a proximity to us. It made them connected to us.
And did they do so? Aaron, if you start me crying, I swear to God, Aaron.
No, hold on. I'll try to make it through. The only way that our kids could see their grandparents is when they would come over to do maintenance on the property or whatever, and we would send the kids over. We would say, go say hi. We wouldn't go over there. We'd say, go say hi.
Out of respect for them.
That's right. We said, look, we're not the Scientologists. We don't recognize the disconnection policy, and we don't recognize that it should have any power over them or our family. And we would send them over. And both of the properties are sold now. And there's no reason to believe that our kids will ever see their grandparents again. And, you know, for Heather, just to comment on it, I know in her heart she would love to reconnect with her parents.
And how are your daughters doing, not being able to see their grandparents at all?
I think it's more upsetting for us
Yeah.
than it is for them. They're not sitting there going, we hate our grandparents because our grandparents won't see us. No, they're sitting there going, we hate Scientology because we know that's why our grandparents can't see us.
My kids are the same.
I think it's important for me to make it clear that in my in-laws' case, they have 2 other children who are in Scientology and married to Scientologists, and they also have grandchildren. So I want to make it clear that I'm not trying to vilify them for not siding with us. And the problem is, no matter what decision they made, they were going to lose children and grandchildren because of Scientology. There was no right decision. We don't hold it against them personally. They're good people.
It's Sophie's choice when you're in Scientology. You're gonna ruin a family, part of your family, no matter which way you go.
Just like staring.
Who?
My neighbor's a Scientologist.
Your neighbor's a Scientologist?
Yeah, that lady over there.
What's her name?
Sue.
So let me ask you this. Is she not connected to you by living here?
She's connected to us through our dog. She actually put a doggy door in her house so that our dog could have free reign in and out of her house. Like, she just loves our dog, right?
Okay.
When I got declared, she found out about it, but she knew Heather wasn't declared yet.
Okay.
So she had a talk with Heather, and she said, okay, let's have a conversation on how to handle the disconnection and how we're going to handle the disconnection with the children, but I don't want to disconnect from the dog.
I can't.
Leah, she said, the dog wouldn't understand.
Aaron, you're liar.
Serious.
You're a liar. These words did not come out of her mouth.
Voicemail recorded. She said the dog wouldn't understand. I wouldn't want him to feel like I, didn't want to see him anymore. And I'm thinking, no, but the kids.
But the children.
The kids totally get it.
The children get it.
Right. The animals, that's crossing a line.
Aaron, we get this question a lot, and I feel like it should finally be answered, and it's very, very, very important. What's happened to the dog?
Well, last we spoke about this, he had not been disconnected from. So the dog has now been disconnected from.
Officially?
Officially. It's the first suppressive dog.
Really? So your dog's not allowed to play with the Scientology neighbor's dog?
Right. And the neighbor, she had to build a 6-foot wooden fence between the properties so that you couldn't visually see from property to property, and the dog couldn't see her, and she couldn't see the dog. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. She had to build.
A fence has been built because you can't have your SP dog looking
That's right.
at her non-SP dog.
That's right.
I'm sorry. Please apologize to your dog. I
will.
Yeah.
He's the most famous dog in Clearwater now, though.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So he has support.
He has a fan club.
Okay, that's good. Okay.
The first hints of Hubbard's inclination to enforce disconnection go all the way back to 1950 in Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health. He also suggested that if your spouse, relative, or a friend disagrees with you getting Dianetics counseling, that the reason for it is likely because they have some vested interest in you staying ill or mentally deficient, and that you should remove yourself from the environment where they are. He describes how such people are afraid of you remembering all the awful things they did to you in the past, such as your mother attempting to abort you before you were even born. The policy works like this. If Joe the Scientologist is connected to a suppressive person, an SP, no matter who that SP is, then Joe is labeled a potential trouble source, PTS. He is denied any further Scientology services until he handles or disconnects from the SP. If Joe wants to continue to be connected with the SP, like say the SP is Joe's mother, then Joe has to somehow get the SP to recant and stop doing whatever he or she is doing that the church considers objectionable, such as posting anti-Scientology statements online or telling Joe how bad Scientology is, etc. The actual policy states, any PTS who fails to either handle or disconnect from the SP who is making him or her a PTS is, by failing to do so, guilty of a suppressive act. So if Joe doesn't disconnect, he is also declared a suppressive person. That's the simplicity of the policy. When you do see a declare order as a Scientologist, you think, bad dude, right? And you're able mentally to sort of build a wall there pretty easily. Unless, of course, you're a family member or were a very close friend. But with those people, the ethics guys will take them individually and try to do a whole song and dance with them and make sure that they're under control and that they understand what a bad dude this guy was or woman was, and that they handle them so that they build their own wall there. And that's a more, they'll take some more care with the people who did know that person to make sure they're still towing the line and with the program. The official statement on the church's website purposefully associates disconnection with how criminals are dealt with. It says, it is much like trying to deal with a criminal. If he will not handle, the society resorts to the only other solution. It disconnects the criminal from the society. The whole thing hinges on who the church calls suppressive. The church can and will declare people for anything they want to, especially for openly disagreeing with the church's leaders or its policies.
It is a mortal sin to speak out against Scientology. You can leave quietly, don't put any pressure on any family members not to do Scientology, but if you speak out against it, pressure will be put on the remaining family members in Scientology to disconnect from that family member.
All right, so you said that what I want, which is basically to leave the church amicably, as can be done. I'll say that I'm not looking to make waves.
Right.
But I've been in the church 33 years. Yeah. It's not delivering what I expected it to do and be for me. And I've decided I no longer want to be a Scientologist. And since I had put a lot of money on account, I want that money back. Mm-hmm. And I'll go my merry way. Mm-hmm. You said in order to do that, first we needed to have a meeting. So let's do the meeting and then get to point B directly.
Okay.
I just state my goals up front as to why I'm here at this meeting.
Yeah, understood. No problem. Right. And obviously there's, ramifications of doing, what you're saying, which is expulsion from the church, and so, you would no longer be associating with Scientologists and things like that. And obviously there's, ramifications of doing, what you're saying, which is expulsion from the church, and so, you would no longer be associating with Scientologists and things like that.
Clarifying that, because you said that
you can talk to anybody you want to.
Yeah.
You can talk to anybody you want to.
To your point, though, you said that I can no longer have association with Scientologists.
Well, you wouldn't, for the fact that it's church policy when someone takes repayment, they're expelled from the church. Yeah.
I was thinking, we just need to go through the ramifications of what he's doing. And you do understand that the people who you are associated with, who are Scientologists, may very well choose, and most likely will choose, to never be associated with you again.
And for many, many, many years, the solution to that problem was to simply claim it was not true. They literally are quoted all over the media saying there is no such thing as disconnection. It does not exist. Every now and then they'll throw in the sort of like, as you characterize it.
We asked church spokesman Tommy Davis and church attorney Monique Yingling about disconnection, and they denied the church forces any Scientologist to break off communication with a family member or friend. They do say, however, that no Scientologist would want to talk to a so-called suppressive person.
You don't want to talk to someone who's attacking your religion. That's your personal choice. If Tommy were my brother and I were a Scientologist and he starts attacking the church nonstop, I might get to a point where I'd want to say, look, I don't want to talk to you anymore if all you're going to do is attack my religion. And that has happened in these situations. But it isn't the church saying you can't talk to this person, but individuals make decisions that they don't want to have contact with someone who is attacking what is their life, essentially.
Who a Scientologist chooses to be in communication with or not is the choice of that individual Scientologist, whether they're a member of the Sea organization, whether they're a parishioner, or otherwise. It is absolutely and completely their choice.
Tommy Davis, who's now the chief spokesman for the church, has said to us that there is no policy of disconnection.
Well, he's kind of put a little bit of a twist on it, because the truth of the matter is it is your own choice to disconnect. You don't have to. You can say, no, I'm not going to disconnect, but then what happens to you is that you can't go into the church and other people won't speak to you. So there's ways of enforcing this. It's kind of a manipulative way. Yeah, you don't have to. My parents could have said, we're not disconnecting from our daughter. And then, they would have had the repercussions of it from the rest of the Scientologists, and they want to have something to do with this organization, that their spiritual salvation is at risk, and they don't want to lose that. They don't want to lose maybe their jobs if they're working for a Scientologist. So they decide, well, I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to follow, the orders and the commands and the things I'm being told to do so that I can not have my life messed up.
The church says it is a fundamental human right to cease communication with someone. It says Mark and Claire Headley have been declared suppressive persons and expelled. The family's decision not to have contact is theirs alone.
we've had enough instances to know that the only reason our family doesn't talk to us is because of the fear imposed by Scientology.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, they were talking to us right up until they weren't. Even Claire's mom talked to us after she was told not to.
Yep.
And she talked to us for a little bit more. And then when she was she knew she was gonna get interrogated. She said, "Okay, I gotta stop now because they're gonna interrogate me. And if I keep talking to you, I'm pretty sure it'll come up."
If they spoke to me, even said hi in a supermarket, they would have to then go report that to the ethics officer and get interrogated.
What did he say? What did he look like?
Exactly. How did you respond? Did you smile? Whatever. You know?
and then she'd have to choose between me and my 3 other siblings.
And her husband.
I mean, my son was declared because he wouldn't disconnect from his friend. I was declared and my husband was declared because we wouldn't disconnect from my son. And now guess what happened? Everyone connected to us just scatters to the wind.
It's the same. Like my mother spoke to me right up until the end, and then a little bit more, right, very around that time. And in the beginning, yes, I do think she wanted to speak to me and continued and didn't think anything badly about me. But over time, they're thoroughly convinced that me and Mike are horrible people. I'm married to Mike Rinder, this horrible, horrible man. So therefore, I'm a horrible person.
And there is a very famous clip of Tommy Davis on CNN responding to questions about this.
Anything that's characterized as disconnection or this kind of thing, it's just not true. There isn't any such policy that in the church that's dictating who people should or should not be in communication with. You know, it just doesn't happen.
Every Scientologist that watched that yelled at the screen and said, "Bullshit, Tommy. I haven't talked to my sister in 27 years because of that policy."
on the positive side, that one clip from Tommy Davis alone is probably responsible for what, like the exit of about thousands of Scientologists, no question asked.
It planted
like,
another seed.
Yes.
It just planted one more seed.
Blatantly lie like
Oh,
that.
they lie. Okay. They lie to the media.
I was working on a movie, researching a film that I was writing called The Next 3 Days, and something pops up on my screen. These related videos. You might be interested in this. And there's an interview with Tommy Davis. Tommy Davis, who is the spokesperson for the church, he's being asked about the policy of disconnection.
Anything that's characterized as disconnection or this kind of thing, it's just not true. There isn't.
I confronted him about this, and I said, "Tommy, I don't have to search outside to ask for, check research and see if this has happened to other people. It's happened to my wife. You asked her and me to disconnect from her parents because of something trivial they did." Tommy outright lies. I mean, why would he lie like that, straight lie?
That denial and other disagreements with the church prompted Oscar-winning director Paul Haggis, a Scientologist for 35 years, to resign. In a letter to Tommy Davis, he mentioned the CNN interview. "You said straight out there was no such policy, that it did not exist," he wrote. "I was shocked. We all know this policy exists. To see you lie so easily," he wrote, "I'm afraid I had to ask myself, what else are you lying about?"
Here is Tommy Davis again in December 2009.
There's a reason groups do this. It's integral to their survival. Groups who don't do it get destroyed. And it's just been proven over and over and over again in Scientology's 58-year history that to whatever degree SPs scream about how horrible it is, bottom line, it is what works. It is what safeguards the church.
What other groups that practice disconnection might have Tommy Davis been referring to? Religious groups? He can't possibly have been knowingly drawing parallels between Scientology and other destructive cults, can he? Yeah, I think that's exactly what Tommy Davis was doing. Whether he knew that or not is debatable, but that is what he was doing, is he was comparing Scientology to other groups that have had to enforce shunning or disconnection or disfellowship, and he was referring specifically to he obviously was referring to JWs, Mormons to some degree, other religious groups, the insular, us versus them, tight-knit, loyal, fiercely loyal attitude that a destructive cult creates or inculcates is necessary for a forming group to form up and keep growing. And a leader, I should say, it's perceived as necessary. It's actually not necessary, but it's perceived that way. And a narcissistic type leader in a situation like this is going to organically, whether he's ever heard of or knows anything about destructive cults, he's going to instinctively push into place us versus them, loaded language, all the characteristics that we use to describe destructive cults are the things that these kinds of leaders naturally do and the followers naturally do when they are creating this tight-knit, close group with very extreme ideas that need to be protected and that they do recognize at some level are not acceptable to the wider society around it, which is why it feels so defensive. They know they're not mainstream. They know their ideas are not in congruence with the moral code and ideas and attitudes of the society in which they live.
You know how cults work. You can't have outside contact because the outside contact might influence you. And they don't want to get from underneath their thumb. They want to keep control of you.
You label these people suppressive so that, everybody automatically, they're discredited and they must disconnect from it. And that's how you keep people in a bubble.
And it's very strategic. And at a certain level within the organization, they definitely recognize this. Maybe it's only the leader who recognizes it. Maybe his lieutenants, like Tommy Davis here, recognize that and are just kind of speaking, kind of bluntly in this case.
They have completely changed what they say on the Scientology website now. This is the page, what does suppressive person mean? And you will see, to be declared a suppressive person is extremely rare and results in expulsion from the Scientology religion. Commitment of acts deemed suppressive acts in the Scientology Justice Code, which includes the suppressive act of publicly renouncing the faith, an act which in Scientology, as well as almost every religion, is grounds for automatic expulsion. Okay, so here is Scientology actually stating that if you have publicly renounced Scientology, you are a suppressive person. It then goes on to say, when someone has been expelled from the religion, that person loses both his or her fellowship with the church as well as with other Scientologists. The condition lasts until they have been restored to good standing. Once the person has been restored to good standing, the prohibition against fellowship with other Scientologists is lifted. Scientology is actually now coming out and saying that even though they're using the euphemism losing fellowship,
which Hubbard has never said that word fellowship in any policy.
They try. I mean, this is how bad things have gotten in Scientology. They are trying to identify that they are similar to the Jehovah's Witnesses, because that's what it's called. It's called disfellowshipping in the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yep.
They're trying to get themselves up to the level of the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Right.
But that statement blatantly, flat out says that Scientology declares people as suppressive persons if they publicly disavow Scientology. That means saying anything negative about Scientology. And that as a result, any Scientologist is required to not be in communication with them until the church says, or Scientology says, the person is restored to good standing, at which point they may again have fellowship with them.
Right.
What Hubbard actually says is, and this is where the fudging always comes in. He says, handle or disconnect. In other words, you're supposed to handle the person to be fine about your participation in Scientology, or to understand that their criticism was not well-founded or whatever. And that gets used to explain that this is a personal choice, and this, you get to decide how you're going to deal with this. But in actual fact, it is a suppressive act in Scientology to remain connected to someone declared a suppressive person by Scientology. They don't make mention of that part. And that's what was so remarkable about that thing we read in the beginning, is that they're in euphemistic terms, they are acknowledging that that is the fact, that it is dictated by Scientology who an SP is, and that a Scientologist may not be in communication with them. Well, they lose their fellowship with them until they are restored to good standing.
Yep.
Mike, you're being too generous. It is also still on the website that there is no disconnection policy, LOL. It's in the FAQs. If you put disconnection in the search, they contradict their own website.
Oh, somebody's got to screenshot that.
Oh, yes.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
So this is, it says, what is disconnection? And then it has
Yep.
a whole bunch of nonsense about it. But then at the very bottom, it says,
there is no Scientology disconnection policy that requires church members to disconnect from anyone, let alone family and friends who simply have different beliefs. Ha! The fact that Scientology now admits on their website that they engage in disfellowshipping people, and that this is something that is enforced by Scientology and only gets unenforced when the person comes back into Scientology or is restored to good standing, that is very, very different than what they have said for many years. This is another little indicator of Scientology being forced to change by outside pressure. And they decided that they were going to change this because they were worried about the problem that it will generate if someone ultimately gets before a court or law enforcement and is describing this, and then they go and pull up the Scientology website and it's just a lie.
Right.
Their credibility keeps being challenged and proven to be incredible. It's not stopping them from doing it, but at least it's forced them to have to admit that they do it. And that's like, I know it sounds like I'm splitting hairs, but this sort of thing is very, very significant. This change did not happen easily. I promise you. This change in how they present what the story of disconnection is was not a decision that was made lightly.
I'm crying, but inside of me, I'm so angry that, you know, I ever contributed to it, believed it. This is hard. I heard stories, you know, people being disconnected from, and I'm sure I was responsible for some of it, you know, in my executive career, or minimally, I didn't do anything about it, but, if, I guess what I'm trying to spit out here is, if I did have, you know, affect anybody's life that way, or was involved in any way with disconnecting anybody, or even knowing about it, not doing anything about it, I want to say to them, I'm sorry. Anyway. Can we take a break?
I mean, I had people write me going, hey, I know we're really good friends, but until your sister is in better standing, I have to unfriend you on Facebook. And I'm like, whatever. You know, like, thank you, make room for more. Bye.
Very oftentimes, our mother will say, I miss my friends. You know?
That's after I have a dream about.
There's a piece of her heart that is so broken, and I feel bad for her. You know?
I do.
30 years of her friends, you know, and I feel so bad when she like runs into them in the store and they just ignore her or they're like, hello, you know, and I just feel bad.
She tries to reach out to the, you know, and I tell her, don't do it. You're only going to kill yourself. It's
Yeah.
going to kill you to reach out to your friends on Facebook for them to just block you or say they don't want nothing to do with you. Let's move on to Christy and Mike for a second, because they lost all of their family. Christy was saying, you know, we don't have grandparents to give our kid to. And Mike's family is not in his life. And so there is an aftermath to all of them.
The main thing for me is the loss of my family. That is the hardest part. I mean, that is the ultimate sacrifice that I made for walking away, is losing my father, my mother, my brother and sister, and all of my friends. There is no getting it back. Like, I have very little hope that I will ever see any of them again, ever. And that is a huge loss. I mean, it's over. Like, my dad died in January, and we weren't able to reconcile before that happened, and there's no chance now of it ever happening. So that was my greatest fear, and it came true.
I couldn't imagine being in LA with my daughter and not being able to go see my mother, or having to explain to my daughter, oh, you can't see grandma, you know, or you can't see your aunts, you know. That's the aftermath of this cult.
Yeah.
Really, truly, is this pain that's here every day. It's an unfortunate part of being a Scientologist that is very conditional, you know, love. And that's between mother and daughter, you know, sisters. You know, our relationship with her and our stepfather was always contingent, it seemed, on Scientology. You know, we were not really doing the right thing if we weren't studying Scientology, going to Scientology every day. And that message, growing up that way, is conditional love. Do you know who's there for these Sea Org members when they leave and they have nothing but like $25 in their pocket and nowhere to go? The non-Scientology family members that they discarded. Those are the people that are there for these people. And that says a lot about what Scientologists are not.
The really cool thing to that is that Kelly and I are friends now again. I disconnected from her at 16, and now she and I reunited in Los Angeles. She completely forgave me because she knew that it was sort of a forced thing, and that I myself wouldn't have really chosen that if I didn't have to, and if I wasn't under the threat of losing my family over her.
Hello. Hi. How are you doing? Good.
You've been busy.
Yes.
This is my Aunt Colleen.
Pleasure. Unconditional love is what Scientology isn't. It's the non-Scientology members that took in their son, that took in their daughter, that took in their brother or friend.
This is my family.
Love
This
it.
is my family.
What you see is what you get.
Yeah. What you see is what you get.
You know, I think if Scientology wants to still be around in 20 years, they need to cancel Disconnection because they're killing themselves.